Alright, welcome back everybody to another exciting homework assignment for PS280, Intro to International Relations. Today's homework assignment asks you to think about the tension between geopolitics and human rights. We've seen a lot of things related to the topic of human rights. They've been peripherally related to our concepts of foreign aid, naming and shaming, NGOs, and obviously we've seen tons of stuff about geopolitics, how countries relate to one another and what their strategic interests are. So today we're going to look at some data that can tell us a little bit about how those two concepts, the desire to respect human rights and geopolitics, are sometimes in tension. For assessing those predictions, we're going to use a particular data set, and that data will be from the United States' State Department human rights reports. Before we go talk about those data, let's talk about what our prediction needs to be. So the homework asks you to essentially just make a prediction about what goes into these human rights reports. I'm going to make a relatively cynical prediction that I hope is not borne out in the data, but that I suspect will be borne out in the data. My cynical prediction is that how the United States talks about its partners in these human rights reports depends on whether or not those countries are our allies. The United States requires the support of its allies, especially in certain regions, so I'm going to bet that they talk about those countries in human rights reports differently than they do when they talk about our non-allies. Specifically, I bet for our allies, we will probably talk about abstract, intangible human rights goodness. For our non-allies, the United States will probably be more critical of those governments and the government institutions directly. So let's see if this prediction is borne out. To get to the data, we start with State Department Human Rights Reports. Google already knows that I am interested in these. I click on the Human Rights Report link, and it takes me to the State Department website. The State Department does these reports for lots of different countries for lots of different years. I'm going to pick 1999 because after September 11th, things get pretty muddy. Then I need to pick two countries, one that's an ally and one that's not. And I also would like them to be in the same region just because that makes them more similar in other ways. So I'm going to pick countries in the Near East and North Africa. Granted, Near East is not the preferred nomenclature, but so it goes. And the first country that I'm going to pick is not an ally. I'm going to look at the Human Rights Practices Report for Egypt for 1999. So I click on Egypt and it brings up the actual report. Now I could go through and read this report, I could take notes, I could try and really get a feel for its content. That would take me quite a while, and I want to be systematic in how I compare different reports. So I'm going to use a tool called a word cloud. I'm going to make a cloud that shows me how prevalent certain words are in this document. So to do that, I first select the entire document, Control A, then I copy the whole document, Control C, and now I need to go to a free word cloud site. So go to Google, I'm going to do free word cloud, and I'm going to click wordclouds.com. I've been playing with this one, it works pretty well. Alright, to paste in my document, first I'm going to click File, Paste Type Text, then I'm going to do Control V to paste it in. There's a lot of website junk at the bottom that I want to get rid of, so I'm going to go down to the very bottom, and I'm going to scroll up, highlighting, and delete some of that State Department website junk. And then I'm going to click Apply. The website then applies its algorithm to make a particular word cloud. The website also lets you do lots of different shapes and stuff. Since I want to compare different countries, I want to make the word cloud look as similar as possible, except for the different content. So I'm going to take circles. I also know that I'm going to be printing this and giving it to the TA, so I'm going to pick a color scheme that works well, namely pick this white background with gray scale. A little boring, but it's better for life in general. The algorithm also lets you scroll and zoom out and in a little bit. I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to zoom out to about here. Alright, so the algorithm populates the circle with the words and makes bigger the words that receive more emphasis in the text. So immediately we can see that this country, who is not a US ally, the Human Rights Report is emphasizing some things that are about legal institutions and about the government institutions. So we see law here, we've got stuff about the police, we've got stuff about cases, which I assume is legal as well, the court, law again there, and state, as well as security, obviously. But we see with this word cloud, there are a fair number of words and a fair amount of emphasis on government institutions. All right, I'm going to keep this for my homework, so I'm going to go back to File. I'm going to do Save as PNG. I'm actually just going to open it. Opens it in in Windows Viewer. I'm going to right-click, copy. I'm going to go to my homework. I'm going to label it because I don't want to forget what data point this was. This was Egypt, 1999, and then I'm going to paste it. Voila. Now let's compare that to a different report. So I'm going to go back to my original State Department website. I'm going to go back to the reports for 1999. I'm going to go back to that same region I was looking at. And I'm going to pick a different country, but this time I'm going to pick one that is a United States ally, namely our good friends in Saudi Arabia. So click on Saudi Arabia. It brings up the Saudi Arabian Human Rights Report. I'm going to do Control All, Control Copy, and then I'm going to go back to my word cloud. Then I'm going to do the same thing, paste. I'm going to delete the junk at the bottom. The documents are long, so this honestly wouldn't make much of a difference, but it just makes things a little bit cleaner. Delete junk at the bottom. I apply. I give it a second to churn. I'm going to switch it back to the circle. I'm going to pick the same theme. And then I'm going to zoom out to about the same place. The algorithm then populates the circle for the Saudi Arabian report. And we see here that there's not as much emphasis on government institutions. So these main things are kind of abstract. We've got Saudi, which is potentially government, but it could also just be a tagliner since we're talking about the Saudi Arabian country. But we see things like women, foreign, abuse, things like that. Law over here is much smaller than it was, and we don't see any of those other legal institutions like courts. Alright, so far this is consistent with our prediction. In the country that is our ally, we're not criticizing the government and its institutions as directly. So then I'm going to do the same thing, save as PNG. I'm going to open it, right click, copy, label, Saudi Arabia 1999, and then paste. Alright, I've got the two word clouds. I can go back and compare them, and I can see whether or not the data supported my prediction. Alright, good luck on the homework, and see you in class.